Commencing entry. Oh, I got it right the first time. That's an improvement. Hello. This is Lethar, a comedian and chosen historian under the Great Council of Seven. The purpose of these activities is to annotate whatever is deemed critical for our heirs to know about Orokin technological advances and history. As such, registering all given tasks by the Council in the Vitruvian format are the optimum choice, as the Vitruvian is genetically coded to function for only those of a pure Orokin bloodline. However, the Council, as always, retains the right to redact any portions of recorded information they consider to be unnecessary for unauthorized individuals to know. In these instances, those of proper standing must simply follow the instructions as stated in Contrary to what some think, not all warframes were crafted for the sole purpose of conflict. Science is what drives us, and we cannot learn without growing, and we cannot grow if we cannot be willing to exchange something in return, whether it be blood or time. For instance, some warframes were designed to meet a very specific purpose, and some were designed purely because of scientific circumstances. One of these such warframes is Oberon, one of our most ancient platforms, who will be the subject of today's discussion. File number: Uniform Oscar Papa Foxtrot Tech 017. Designation: Oberon. Countless generations ago, the Empire set out in order to conquer the stars because old Earth was no longer sustainable. Unification under the Empire came at great cost. Billions slaughtered, civilizations eliminated, and entire landmasses ravaged. Although a large-scale reconstruction project for the entire planet was initially attempted, this ultimately failed, as too many lives were being lost to the world that became a hellscape. With no other option, the Empire took flight across the system over the centuries, leaving settlements wherever life was supported, and eliminating any and all civilizations found, regardless if hostile or not. Not all circumstances were deemed necessary to record, as some territories were under our control in a matter of days, if not hours. One exception to this would be the first deployment of the Frost Warframe onto the dwarf planet Pluto, which sparked the beginning of what would be known today as the Purge of Pluto. Eventually, support for the reclamation of Earth grew until it was decided that a survey vessel would be dispatched back to Earth, carrying a hazardous response and cleanup team and a handful of volunteer scientists. Upon arrival, the team was astounded to learn that, although the radiation measurements throughout the environment were at moderate levels, life had been reborn on old Earth. Trees and flora flourished where there was once nothing. Ruins of old Earth civilizations became buried under the earth or simply consumed by nature over time. Even local organisms were spotted, signifying that the planet's wildlife and vegetation had obtained some level of resistance to the radioactive atmosphere. It was incredible. The hazardous response team was successful in capturing and safely storing samples of any and all living species which could be transported without specific requirements. Upon learning of this miraculous discovery, the Council of Seven ordered for more vessels to be loaded up and taken to old Earth, as the Council had developed a sudden interest in establishing small outposts throughout the planet, which could eventually be built up into research stations. However, even though equipment to protect against the dangerous radiation was available, the wildlife would pose a potential threat, especially any wildlife not yet discovered. A shepherd was needed to watch and protect the flock of Orokin sheep who would otherwise surely meet their end on old Earth. And so, Oberon was born. Designed with the sole purpose to ward off potential predators or hostile wildlife, Oberon was explicitly given horn-like protrusions on his helmet in order for dangerous organisms to recognize him as the alpha male after any possible conflict with Oberon. However, Oberon was not intended to possess a fearsome appearance to all life on old Earth, as it was almost certain that eventually some species would be captured and domesticated. In order to future-proof Oberon, he was given the ability to influence any non-combative organisms with odorless pheromones. These pheromones would alter the mind of the afflicted animal, causing them to recognize Oberon not as an enemy, but as a master. However, the pheromones only succeed against wildlife that does not already have aggressive behavior towards Oberon. Emotions can change how the brain works, even for a dumb animal. Given that this was the first time we were dealing with domestication instead of eradication of wildlife, it's kind of surprising we could produce these results. Upon recognizing Oberon as a master, the pheromones would then reinforce the muscular structure of the organism, becoming stronger and more resilient. Oberon was decreed not just to be the guardian of old Earth, but also the master of its life. Attribute number 1. Exude. Although local wildlife were resistant to the lingering radiation, they were not totally immune. As such, Oberon was outfitted with a selectively permeable outer layer, which would allow him to absorb any and all radioactive particles within his surroundings and morph them into different radioactive isotopes. After testing on much of the local wildlife, it was concluded that Hesium-269 was the best option, as it does not last long in the environment, meaning that cleanup is hardly required. As an added touch, Oberon can combine his gathered radioactive material and imbue it with the essence of the void, made possible purely because of the operator. If need be, Oberon may generate and instantaneously blast an enemy within its line of sight with a void-altered strain of Hesium-269. The sheer force is enough to knock down his target, and upon contact, the radioactive blast will break apart into smaller particles, which will seek out the nearest entities which Oberon considers to be hostile. Of course, targets struck by Hesium-269 become victim to radiation poisoning, losing control of cognitive functions and rationality. Oberon can share this potency with his squad if the infusion supplementary module is active. Attribute number 2. Terrain. In the world of beasts, it is sometimes necessary to mark your territory. Oberon is no different. At his discretion, Oberon may create a field of ionizing radiation which lingers for some time. This field in particular is capable of shifting through the electromagnetic spectrum, and because this entails a perpetually wavering electron-volt measurement, each field conjured by Oberon can protect all non-hostile entities within the boundaries of the field from any and all elementally charged attacks, while at the same time damaging hostile targets, but in a much less lethal dosage compared to his exude attribute. For instance, magnetic particles which come into contact with this field will lose its charge almost immediately, thanks in part to being essentially diffused by the field's ionizing radiation. As an alternative option, Oberon may equip the Eruption module, which restricts Oberon into being able to cast one field, but in exchange slows down the decaying process of the radioactive field, doubling its duration. Additionally, Oberon may detonate the field at any time he wishes, immediately destroying all lingering particles and damaging whatever foe is standing within the field. Admittedly, this module is a bit old-fashioned and doesn't see much favor from operators. This has been forwarded to the engineering department for recommended overhaul. Attribute number 3. Analeptic. Naturally, there is always the potential for loss of life. Oberon is no exception. With limited medical resources available during the early days of old Earth exploration, every little supply shipment mattered. Given that, one of Oberon's notable talents is his power to regenerate living tissue. Although dosing standard humanoids with radiation still has several health-related complications, Oberon can virtually eliminate any potential risks by blending all generated Hesium-269 with his standard energy supply. Upon need, Oberon unleashes a radial wave which, upon contact with friendly targets, begins reconstruction, capable of reversing damage from even at the cellular level within seconds. Although not as powerful as radiation therapy, this variation persists for technically an infinite amount of time, so long as Oberon himself has the energy to maintain this healing process, meaning that as long as the radio wave strikes all living team members at once, Oberon has no need to stay close by, as the healing process itself is independent. Activating the radio wave while standing within the confines of a terrain field enhances the wave itself, increasing the defenses of all struck allies at no additional energy consumption. Another shining aspect of Oberon is his Phoenix module. The Phoenix module has the unique capability to reverse immediate death, which is accomplished first when a target suffers enough damage. Once this is reached, all active Hesium-269 particles immediately burst, applying an instant but small boost to tissue regeneration. After bursting, all active particles fluctuate at such a rapid frequency that all incoming harm is essentially negated, thereby granting its target a maximum of 5 seconds to either run or correct themselves. Any longer is impossible without causing the Hesium-269 to explode, eliminating all living beings around the area. It is important to note that the Phoenix module cannot be activated multiple times in rapid succession, as the Hesium-269 particles require time to adjust back to regular fluctuations. Additionally, the Phoenix module itself is affected by power-enhancing modules, allowing any operator to increase the amount of health given by the burst. Attribute number 4. Punishment. Oberon possesses built-in dosimeters, being able to detect any and all living things with at least 10 milligrams of radiation, which on a planet like old Earth effectively meant a passive radar. With this, once Oberon recognizes that multiple hostile targets are within close proximity, he may directly manipulate their particles via void energy interference. To the normal bystander, this may appear as some form of telekinesis. All creatures identified as hostile are violently hoisted and thrown back down with enough force that the minimum amount of radiation each target passively has detonates in a fragmentary method. Due to the presence of raw void energy with this radioactive maneuver, all affected targets become temporarily blinded, and any who are already under the effects of Hesium-269 or any other radioactive particles take additional damage. Should any entity die in this way, there is a probability that their very life essence will be quite literally blown out of their very own body, becoming a convenient source of sustenance for Oberon or any other friendly. The hallowed alteration is available, which causes all targets struck by punishment to release microfields similar to that of terrain. Although smaller, these microfields possess a more advanced strain of Hesium-269, being capable of increasing the durability of all allied organisms, while also afflicting enemies at a much higher interval than terrain, despite being significantly smaller. Strength-enhancing and energy cost reduction modules are of high priority on Oberon, as the right modifications allow the operator to maintain Analeptic for virtually an infinite amount of time. Regardless, that will finish up this recording. Praise be the Empire.